Welcome to 20 Minutes with 2020 Mendocino, our new weekly podcast segment featuring cannabis topics ranging from breeding, growing, cloning, and everything in between. On today's episode, we will be discussing seed cracking or seed scarification. I'm sure everybody has seen our new seed cracker that we just released online from our recent post on Instagram, as well as our newsletter if you've signed up for it. Adam actually is writing an article for Grow Magazine on this very subject. I'm sure you guys seen our recent post with the graphs of his data. So Adam is here to talk seed scarification. Adam, hello, how are you doing?
Hi. Good. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, I look forward to talking about this.
So Adam, talk about the design of the seed cracker and how you discovered seed cracking and what led you to create such a product.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna kind of start with the basics here and kind of explain the process and exactly, it's a subject that actually some can be definitely debatable in the cannabis world, although in my mind there's no debate at all, especially after the experiments that I've been running. So I'll just kind of go through the fundamentals and we'll go from there. So seed scarification is a process that is widely used in agriculture throughout the world. It's not only a vital tool, but sometimes it's an absolutely necessary tool to use for agricultural applications. There's some seeds that just won't have a very low to zero germination rate without some type of scarification. So with cannabis now, that's not typically the case. And so therefore, I think it becomes a little more of a contentious issue because a lot of people are used to seeds that sprout really easy. And so therefore they're like, well, what's the point of cracking them? That seems obtrusive um, and overkill. And then, yeah, I absolutely agree. In a lot of cases, it totally is. So um, scarification basically refers to the intentional alteration, weakening, or opening of the seed coat in order to aid or improve in the germination process. So this is basically anything that you do. It can even be a chemical in some cases, although not commonly with cannabis. But with cannabis, it's usually two things. It's either abrasion or it's the seed. I call it seed coat rupture. So it's basically cracking, as we put it, the shell. So I a lot of people use the abrasion method, which is basically sandpaper. You see everything from people shaking seeds in a tumbler with sandpaper at the bottom. I've actually coined some methods with using an electric sander with a jar upside down and the seeds just floating on top of the sandpaper running. Um, however, after kind of working my way towards seed coat rupture, which I think I probably felt was maybe a little intrusive, I guess you could say, or I quickly learned that there's absolutely no comparison. That seed coat rupture far is far more effective than simply abrasion than the simple abrasion process. So our typical rule of thumb is that if your seeds germinate within a 24-hour period, say, or even a 48-hour period, and you're getting close to 100% germination rate, there's really not much of a point in going through the effort of uh, of rupturing the seed coat. However, if you get beyond that 48-hour point and you still are at either a low percentage or even you're not close to 100% germination, you really start to risk pathogen issues that start to kick in around that time. And this is especially true when your temperatures are warmer. So we want to make sure that our general rule of thumb at 2020 is that if we have seeds that take longer than about 48 hours to germinate, then we will use we will rupture the coats. We will use the tool that we've recently invented, and and you will find to have we have found, and you will find that there's much better results than going with just trying to germinate them without any type of without doing anything at all with them. So the basic process though is essentially just cracking the shell and doing it without damaging the embryo. So that's the more or less simple process. Now, how I came across seed, this is part of your question, but how I came across this method was somewhat by accident, but it was really by default in that, you know, we had certain strains or certain packs, groups of seeds that were very stubborn and we were having trouble germinating them. And particularly a lot of the Afghan strains tend to be bad. I've had a lot of autoflower seeds that took longer, and I don't know if that's if there's anything relation to that or if it's just coincidence, but we have had some autoflowers that were significantly more stubborn. Um, but what basically I've had issues where we just had really bad germination rates, and I think at one point I decided that the sandpaper just wasn't really doing enough for me, and I had actually done some experiments that I did record where I was getting at the most 10% improvement with the sandpaper method. So at one point I just essentially one time just started cracking some with my teeth, which seemed to be the easiest way to kind of control it without a special tool. And what I found was immediate results. And even to this day, if I have a seed that still hasn't germinated in 48 hours, and most of the rest of them have, I'll usually just grab it and then pop it in my teeth real gently. And actually, I've seen cases where that seed was literally wanted to burst out of the seed coat, and within moments of cracking it, um, the taproot actually starts to come out. So you basically just had this poor little embryo that was trapped inside of there, and with a stubborn seed coat that didn't want to open. So yeah, so I guess we can move on to my experiment and talk about that, or do you want to? Is there any questions that have been submitted that we should go into now? I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Carlos?
Well, one question that we seem to get is they always ask, do they crack the seed first, or do you recommend them using, their regular method of wetting the seed first? And if they don't see any germination after a couple of days, then use the seed cracker.
Okay, that's a great question. So yes, my answer to that is if you know that the seeds are stubborn, so you've either done a test run of them and you had bad luck, or you just know that they're stubborn seeds, that you're going to get that low percentage or even slow, it's this really slow germination, then I say I recommend just rupturing them beforehand, and that saves having to do it basically midstream. So, however, I've done many seeds while they were 2 or 3 days in, and it's actually a really good method as well. So I think you're going to have a group of people that are still weary or a little shy of actually cracking their seeds, which is completely understandable. It seems very intrusive. And those people maybe want to stick with let's see which ones don't um, germinate, and then crack them after a couple of days. However, what I've proven is that you get them out the gate like that, and you basically mobilize them to get through that seed shell, that seed coat quickly. It essentially just opens them up to the fast lane almost immediately. So you're gonna have better results if you just do it in the beginning, if you don't have seeds that are already super viable and germinate easily on their own.
Let's go into the findings of your experiment, Adam. What did you find?
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to step back a tiny bit and then I'm going to jump on that, because I didn't really, and now that I think about it, I didn't quite answer your question, the first question about our tool. So after basically using the tooth technique that I still use to this day. I realized that I needed a tool that could do a large amount of seeds at one time, and that there's a few people making some nice little delicate hand tools, plier type things with little cranks, and there's different designs out there. And I certainly would say that probably most or all of those work. I've never actually used any myself. However, most or all of them I've seen are single seed devices. So if you're doing 20, 50, 100 seeds at a time, that's going to take forever. You're going to be sitting there, going through them all one at a time. So, and even with your teeth, that takes a long time to do 100 of them. So, I actually, with my experiment, I did 100 seeds, and I did it in the device that we made, and it's basically a simple device. It's a wood block with 3 grooves cut in it, and the 3 grooves represent the 3 sizes of seeds. And I say 3 sizes, I mean the 3 basic sizes that I came up with by looking through a huge assortment of seeds and finding the biggest ones I could possibly find and the smallest ones I could possibly find, and then the average. So most of them end up in that average slot, but essentially it's a groove cut in a piece of wood, a V-shaped groove that you set the seeds in, and then the top block of wood just kind of gently presses down and cracks the seed, but the groove protects the embryo, so it doesn't allow that to go beyond the point of damaging or killing the embryo. So that's the important part. So yeah, it's very simple design, but it can do 10 to, depending on if you do all one size or not. I mean, it can easily do 10 seeds at a time, and actually more. I think I fit like 15 on there, but it can easily do 10 at a time. So yeah, we kind of just decided to make this tool for our use, and just as to get it out to the community. And um, it's really been it's proven to be effective. So I'm going to just go right into the question of the experiment. So I basically decided at this point I need to prove to myself and to everyone else or whoever cares that this product works, and not just this product, but more actually this method works, because it still is a somewhat of a, it can be a contentious debate. And again, a lot of people are really strong towards the sandpaper abrasion method, which I have again found not to be very effective. Um, so I started with 200 seeds. These were some autoflower seeds that I already knew were super stubborn. Um, I blindly counted those into 2 groups of 100, and I ran 100 of them through the cracking device, and the other 100 I didn't touch. And I put them in our classic wet paper towel, damp paper towel, at I think I had it at 80 to 82 degrees. I kept a thermometer on it the whole time to keep keeping track of the highs and lows. It varied between 80 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, and I kept them in there for 180 hours, and every roughly 24 hours, although I wasn't on spot on that, every day I did do a count and photograph the process. So to my surprise, I guess, even to my surprise, we had some really cool findings from that. So after the first 30 hours, we had 17% of the scarified seeds had already sprouted. And the way I defined sprouting in this experiment was if the taproot was extending from the seed coat by more than 1 millimeter. So I didn't count if it just was cracked open. I could actually see a lot of them had cracked open, but the taproot hadn't started extending yet. After 30 hours, we had 31% of the scarified seeds. I'm sorry, 17% of the scarified seeds and 0% of the non-scarified seeds. And then at 54 hours, we had 31% of the scarified seeds and 1%, which was 1 seed after 54 hours of the non-scarified had germinated. So moving on, at 90 hours was when we started to finally see the non-scarified starting to come out. And at that point, we got, at 100 hours, we had 30% of the non-scarified, and we were already almost to 80% of the scarifieds up then at 100 hours. And then the next day at 120 hours, we hit the peak with the scarified seeds, and that was 99. So we had 99 out of 100 of the seeds were had a taproot of more than 1 millimeter. And at that day and time, we had 52% of the non-scarified. And then at that point, I'm just waiting for those to go. And I ended up going two more days after that, and we ended up hitting 80%. And that at the 180-hour point, I stopped the experiment. Although I actually did leave it, I just didn't do a count because I know it stayed the same. So essentially, after 180 hours, there wasn't really probably going to be any more coming out of the non-scarified seeds, and we already had 99% of the scarified. So that was the graph that I posted on Instagram, and we have been, as you mentioned, asked by Grow Magazine to do an article for them, which would be the second article I've written for Grow, and that it will explain all of this actually. So it's kind of essentially this talk I just gave uh, was a lot of what this article is going to be, but it's an introduction to seed scarification, and then moving into to this experiment. So I'll have some pictures of it posted. It'll should be in Grow Magazine, and then uh, the graphs and some of the and all of the data that I collected from the experiment. So, and again, in the end, the conclusion for this is that seed scarification absolutely works. The seed coat rupture, if done properly, is very effective and minimal to no damage to the seeds. And in fact, another observation I made is I actually ended up planting these seeds, and I noticed that a lot of the ones that weren't scarified had a much more difficult time releasing the seed coat and dropping it after they started sprouting, after they started kind of growing up out of the soil. And I know everybody's seen this where some people call it the helmet or whatever, but the split open seed is still kind of stuck to the top of the plant, and it sometimes it actually can impede the growth completely, and you have to actually pull them off. But I noticed the non cracked seeds some of them definitely had more trouble releasing that seed coat. So that was another part of the experiment. If I do this experiment again, I'm going to actually extend it further and kind of cover that, and also do a sandpaper a side by side with the abrasion technique too, just to kind of close that door once and for all. So yeah, I believe that kind of covers this. I don't know where we're at with our 20 minutes. I could certainly talk longer if we're not at the end yet.
Well, I'll just let everybody know that the seed cracker is available at www.2020mendocino.com/merchandise. That takes you directly to our Etsy page. We have plenty of them available, so please order one. If you have some very old seeds or some very new seeds that you made, like Adam said, expect the Grow Magazine article coming soon. We have a few minutes, Adam. Is there anything else you want to discuss?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. So that was something I wanted to talk about. So a lot of people, it's kind of funny because when people have germination issues, a lot of times their initial thought is that the seeds are old. And in fact, a lot of times it's the opposite. It's that the seeds are too new. And I've seen seeds that can take upwards of 6 months to really, or even a year to really reach their peak performance in germination. So for us, I use the seed cracker oftentimes for really fresh seeds when I'm in a hurry to get them sprouted, and those are actually some of the worst seeds to sprout. Is the really super fresh ones that haven't had much time to dry out, and some strains come off the plant, out of a dry bud, and they're basically ready to germinate, and others you have to wait weeks and even months. And so the other things that can lead to poor germination is just improper storing, and that's normally just too moist of an environment. Moisture is one of the worst things for them. Of course, you don't want extreme heat, but for the most part, seeds are pretty robust. They're not super delicate. They can typically be stored in a variable temperatures and climates, but moisture is one of the worst things for them. And then really old seeds, yeah, they will just basically start to die off, and the shells get super hard. And you do see this problem where you get the initial seed sprout kind of starts to come out, and then the plant dies, and that tends to be a problem with old seeds. And cracking the seed coat certainly improves their odds of getting out and into the world, and growing through like any of the pathogen issues that are kind of preying on them and waiting to attack the weak and the small. So yeah, that's, I guess, covers that subject, but I wanted to go over that a little bit.
Well, I think that gets us right to our 20 minutes, Adam. Once again, everyone, if you have any questions, please submit them at 2020mendocino.com/podcast. Tune in next week, same time, same place, noon Pacific on Sundays on YouTube. I think for the next several episodes, I don't want to tease too much, but we're going to have a few guests come in and talk some stuff. We'll be talking about the whip, sour snow, sour strawberry, some of the history between us and our friends here in Humboldt and the Bell Springs area. I don't want to say too much, Adam, but I think they're going to have a good time. Do you have any final words?
Yeah, no, thanks for joining. And as I say every time, please submit questions on our website. We love to get in the questions. It really kind of keeps this thing going. So we need you guys to keep the questions rolling in, and we'll keep answering them. So we don't be disheartened if we're not getting to your question. We're stockpiling them and trying to compile them into categories so they fit the specific podcast that we're doing. And I know at some point we've been talking about doing a live one as well, which those are really fun. And then we can just answer questions as they come in, and maybe do something like really fun, like a speed dating thing where it's just a 1 minute, everybody, submit a question, and then 1 minute to answer it. And, those can be anything from breeding questions to basic growing questions, and even industry, or, uh, you know, anything that we can dig out of our bag of tricks. We'll try to share with you guys. So thanks for joining, everyone.
See you next week, guys.